Simply put, simply put.
What's up, people? My name's Chad Smith, and welcome to episode 3 of the Simply Put podcast, where we discuss difficult topics in simple terms with extraordinary people. And today we're talking about the current relationship between police and our communities. How can we improve it? And with everything that's going on, is it really even possible right now with so much tension? Our first guest is Police Officer Ryan Tillman, who's been on the police force in Southern California for 7 years. He's 33 years old and says that never in a million years did he think he'd become an officer after being profiled and stopped by cops so much growing up in his own community. But now he's the founder of Breaking Barriers United, an organization that's working towards bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community. And our second guest is David Price. He's 18, a student at Loyola University from New Orleans, and he invented the safety pouch, a car accessory that stores driving credentials and, if used properly, will minimize the movements of a driver when stopped by the police. Thank you both for joining us and being here today.
Man, thanks for having me, Chaz. It's really a true honor, truly humble to be here, and pleasure to meet you, David.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. It's a pleasure to be both of you two as well.
Yeah, thank you guys. And also, this is such a great, the fact that you, David, have made and designed this pouch is awesome, but it's also really telling and sad that there's even a need for something like this. The fact that so many people, that it's catching so much heat is it's great, but it shouldn't be necessary, you know? I want to start with the first question. Ryan, is for you. So we all know that there is a real problem historically and in the present with police officers using excessive force on young Black men and women, often shooting and killing them. And it starts young. And George Floyd's murder earlier this year sparked international outrage. The media really pushed it. And you personally have had some bad experiences growing up yourself. So now, as a police officer, what is your response to all of this? I know it's a very general, broad question, but I think one thing is that a lot of people just want to hear of the police, like an officer's side of the story, just to admit even that there is a problem in order to start this healing process. So just go ahead. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, for sure. So first and foremost, the death of George Floyd was absolutely unjustified. Those officers were completely wrong. I'm not a police officer that stands by that at all. On behalf of, policing in general, I want to tell the audience that I'm sorry, because that's not what I represent. That's not what I signed up to do. But moving forward and talking about the situation in our society in regards to law enforcement in the community, right now we're living in some polarized times, and unfortunately we've become so divided. I'm a Christian guy. I have a firm belief in Jesus Christ. And one of those things, is that I've realized is through growing older is that, the enemy, which, for me, the enemy is Satan, the devil, whatever you want to call him. He comes to divide people. And when he divides people, he can conquer you. And so why is that so important? Why am I actually bringing that up? Well, there's a lot of things throughout our history that have divided us as people, race being one of them. At the very beginning of time, race has divided people, has segregated people, and that caused division in our society. You move forward in the time, you start talking about slavery movements, you start talking about the civil rights movement, and still race was one of those bigger issues. And then you insert law enforcement into that equation. Well, at the time, you had it was an all-white profession that was actually used to protect property. Some will even say it was dated back to slave patrol to go and catch slaves. But then you also see vivid images of law enforcement officers that are guarding, podiums of racial people or people that are racist that are giving, speeches, or you see police officers spraying water hoses at people, or you see them using their dogs, on Black people. And then you also had police officers that were also members of the KKK. So one of the things that we have to do as a society, especially police officers, first and foremost, is we have to come to the reality that policing wasn't always founded on the good stuff. But at the same time, we also have to acknowledge that there is evil that exists in our society, and there are people that want to do bad things. And so who is going to protect those from being innocent victims of people that want to do evil? And that's police officers. And so the reason I bring those two things up is because what we lack in society is we lack balance. you have to have balance on both sides. And so and by having balance, it will allow you to see, both the facts, but it will also allow you to be emotional. So the two polar opposites that we have right now, where we have the emotional side where people just want to react based off of pure emotion. And then we have the factual side is, all we want to talk about is facts, but we don't want to empathize or have any emotion for the person that's going through something. So that's what we need, the balance. We need both. And so I'm not going to be long-winded, but as police officers in America, can we do better? Yes. Will we do better? Yes. Do we need to get rid of some bad police officers? Yes. Are there a lot of bad police officers out there? No. Do we see a lot of the bad police officers out there? Yes. And so we'll have more dialogue about that in a minute, about what's factual, what's real, and what's not. But that's kind of what I wanted to lead off with today.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. David, hearing this and just in context of all that, just you as well, being an 18-year-old Black male, the fact that you even had the idea to start this, to create this, to start working on this patent, what has it been like for you in your experiences with police officers or any of your peers' experiences? Like, how do you even feel walking past law enforcement in your own community?
Yeah, so, I was lucky enough, I never had to deal with any form of police brutality as of yet. Hopefully I don't, but, I always grew up around law enforcement. A bunch of my neighbors are in law enforcement. So, I never really felt scared of them. But, in the media, you see, how evil some officers could be with, George Floyd, Tamir Rice, so many other victims like that. And, it's just really, seeing people who look like me, people younger than me or the same age as me who are being profiled. So that's what kind of really motivated me to try to make, traffic stops as safe as I could for, us as a community and, for all people as well. So that's why I came up with the idea for the safety pouch to minimize the reaching aspect for your information during the initial traffic stop. All your information will be presented to the officer to make it safer for both parties.
Yeah. Okay. So Ryan, what do you say to teens like David? Because, or just everybody in general, because we see these videos so much. Like Malcolm Jenkins mentioned on the last episode that every time he sees these videos, even though he himself now doesn't experience extreme levels of police brutality or racial profiling, even when he was younger, he had the privilege of saying like, hey, I know so-and-so in the police force, and like officers would just hop off of his back, but his friends wouldn't experience that same thing. However, he still says that every time he sees a video of another man or woman being murdered, it's like seeing his family or himself getting killed over and over again. It's traumatic. So like, what do you have to say to people who may live in fear of that?
So here's the thing is, I try to caution people from living in fear, because living in fear is not oftentimes living in reality. And the reason I say that is, unfortunately, because we're human beings, because of human nature, the reality is that people like to capitalize off of making somebody in fear of them. There's a lot of capital, there's a lot of money to be made on that. And so the same media that does a disservice for law enforcement, and yes, I said a disservice for law enforcement, is the same media that also does a disservice for Black people in general. The reason I said it is because I'll start with the law enforcement side of things. All we see a lot of times in the media is police officers either not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, but they're not giving the context as to why they're doing what they're doing. So what it's doing is it's instilling fear in guys like David and anybody else that doesn't know any better, just because that's what you visually see. That was me before I got into law enforcement. I would see things on the media. I would see things that are coming on Instagram, or at the time it was MySpace. And I started to formulate some type of fear because of these situations that I saw, but I wasn't giving the exact context of the whole situation and understanding that, hey, the law enforcement officers were actually in the right, but they didn't paint it that way. On the flip side of that, we talk about, Black people in general. And I'm going to say I'm using our race for a reason, because one, all of us on this call are Black. And two, we have to realize that the same media that's doing a disservice for law enforcement is doing the same exact thing to Black people. World Star Hip Hop is a good example of that. World, and not to these be bashing companies, but on World Star Hip Hop, it's a lot different now. But historically speaking, since the inception of World Star Hip Hop, we would see time and time and time and time again Black people doing things that just made us look terrible as a race, terrible as a race. And many people were capitalizing off of that stuff that was being put out there and portrayed. So when you have a white person or a Hispanic person, whoever, Asian person, they see these videos, what is it doing? It's stimulating fear amongst them, saying that all these Black people are like that. All these Black people are like animals, all the other stuff. So then you go back to the media and we talk about these protests. Well, what was going on with the protests? There's a lot of good, peaceful protests going on right there. There's a lot of good people out there for rightful reasons trying to go out there and protest these social issues, and they are absolutely correct in doing so. But what were we seeing in the media? You were seeing all these people rioting. You were seeing people that were breaking windows. You were seeing them lighting stuff on fire. And who were they getting? They were getting a lot of the Black people that were doing it. So what is that doing? It's saying that these Black people are animals and all this other stuff. And so the reason I say that, just because we see that visually, is that the reality? Well, all of us on this call know that's not the reality. So if it's not the reality, then what is the reality? And that's where my job comes in with Breaking Barriers United, is to provide context into every single one of these situations that we talk of. So that way we can have a better understanding about it. So that way we can start, making understanding based off of factual information.
Right. Yeah. I think what a lot of people blindly overlook is the fact that the media pushes so much of our perception of what is to be considered true or untrue. Not that it makes it not that it justifies it at all or in any way, but I really believe that the reason why George Floyd's killing was pushed so much more was because the media backed it, like mainstream
100%.
media.
100%.
And it could have been anybody, but for some reason, this particular instance was chosen to be pushed out. So what I want to dive a little bit more into that, because I feel like this is a topic that people tend to stray away from a little bit. How just talking generally about the manipulation of mainstream media, and I'd just like you to elaborate on that a little bit more.
So I'll give you an example, but before I give you the example, what I want to touch on briefly is that we have to establish, is there a problem in policing? Is there an excessive force when it comes to law enforcement in the minority community? Well, if we look at the factual information, I'm not going to go into all the numbers, but if we look at the factual information, there are more, police officers that are killing other people other than Black people. However, on the same token, there are more Black people that are actually having force used against them that's not lethal force than any other race. So there's some disparities there that's sad on one end, because Black people are getting hit up more than more races. But at the same time, when we talk about actual lethal force, is Black people are not getting killed as much as we like to think. So that's one of the facts that we have to come to the agreement with. What if we have to talk about what is a change that we can actually make? First we have to acknowledge, is there change to be made in law enforcement? Yes. What does that change look like? What the change look like is that we have to raise the standards for policing across America. The reason I say that is because policing from city to city, state to state, and county to county is vastly different. Which means is that, if I go and I'm a police officer in Southern California, but if I go to Idaho and do policing, the training levels are going to be vastly different. The training levels might be a lot lower. As a matter of fact, I know there probably are, just because Southern California kind of leads the way with the training standard. And so if somebody in Idaho messes up or makes a mistake because they're not trained, well, does somebody say, oh, that's just that guy. That's his own fault, because he's in Idaho or wherever he's at. That's not Ryan's fault. No, that's not what happens. They say, well, Ryan's a part of the problem because he's in the same profession, right? So we have to change and raise the standards. Now, when it talks about manipulation, if I told you guys a story right now, let me ask you guys. This is a question for both of you. If I asked you a question, if you guys saw a video, 30-second video of a police officer shooting at a guy that was running away from him, would you guys say that was justified or unjustified? If that's all I gave you, just saw a 30-second video of an officer shooting at somebody running away with a knife in his hand, would it be justified or unjustified?
That's a very tough question. The first thing that would come to my mind is that I always feel like there are other ways than killing somebody to you know, to stop a potentially dangerous situation. Like I know that in America, for sure, the amount of lethal force that is used against citizens is far greater than any other country. It's like militarized. In London or like in the UK, for example, the way that police officers are even trained is much more, you know, extensive, and they figure out other ways to handle situations. So that's the first thing that I'd say. But then after that, after the fact that I don't think lethal force is necessary as often as it's used, I'd want to know, okay, what is the context of the situation? Just like you were saying before, but not to justify. But I would not justify the fact that he shot at him.
Okay, so you not justified. And what about you, David?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely unjustified, because if the suspect is running away, there's no reason to use lethal force. You know, the police officer should not be the judge, juror, and executioner at all. So I would have to know more context of it, though.
So let me give you guys a little bit more context, and I want to see if your answers change.
Okay.
So let's say that the officer responds to, or he goes to work that day. He's listening to the radio. He asks on the radio, "Hey, he says basically he's listening to the radio, and the dispatch says, hey, there's a guy that called the police station and said that he wants to kill police officers. Called twice." Then that same guy goes into a restaurant and threatens the patrons with a knife. He actually has a knife in his hand and threatens the patrons with a knife. Then he threatens officers with a knife. Then later on, other officers he gets away from other officers go try to stop this guy, and they try to tase him 2 times, but the taser didn't work. And then they say they try to use a beanbag on him 3 times, and the beanbag didn't work on him. And so when the officer goes on and the officer sees him, he has a knife. He has a knife pointed to his head. As he starts to run away, an officer that's looking at him, he looks up and he sees that there's 3 or 4 other people that guy is sprinting towards. And that officer decides to use deadly force or shoot at him. Does it change that scenario at all?
That totally changes the scenario. But it also brings to mind, honestly, the amount of times that I've heard of people committing mass shootings and being safely taken into custody, regardless of the actions that they just committed.
So let's hold that thought, because I want to talk about that. But going back to that scenario, the reason I bring that up is because that is an example of what's going on in society right now.
Yeah,
we would see the 30-second video of that officer getting out of his car and shooting at somebody without actually knowing the whole context that went into it. So by the time that video gets out there, it takes fire, because you have everybody just looking at an officer shooting at a guy that's running away, not understanding the whole entire picture. And so now what happened is now this media has now stimulated this fear amongst people, saying police are not your friend, they're dangerous, and they will kill you. Not realizing that this guy that the guy was shooting at was actually an imminent threat to the officers and the public, right? So then going back to your point as far as the mass shooters and saying like, well, we see often, you know, certain white people that will be mass shooters and they'll be taken into custody, whereas somebody else might be get killed, like a black guy might be getting killed for reaching for a gun or whatever it may be, or reaching in his pockets. What I have to say about that is this: we have to understand something, that no matter who it is, no matter what officer it is, we still have a moral and a lawful obligation to reach, to uphold. And that being said is, you know, if you do not pose a threat to me, I don't care if you've killed 100 people. The moment you put your gun down, I cannot just say, oh, well, I'm still going to shoot him because he killed 100 people already. I still have to say, all right, cool, he's no longer a threat, and I have to take him into custody. Whereas when we see the videos of a police officer shooting at somebody reaching in his pockets or whatever it may be, that officer at that time, he feels a certain level of threat for whatever reason. It could feel like, hey, this dude has a gun in his pocket, or hey, he's reaching fast. I don't know. And sometimes officers are unaware and they may use force. Now, this is not me justifying officers' actions, but what I'm saying is that we have to treat every single situation as an isolated incident, and we can't make a judgment call until we understand all the facts that go into that situation. And so just because we don't see it, or just because this is all I see, it doesn't necessarily make it a reality for what's going on in our current climate.
David, do you have any comments to add about any of this?
I mean, you know, going back to what he said, once he gave, you know, more context of the story, you know, that is a hard, you know, judgment call to make. But, you know, I couldn't really put myself in that situation. But if I did, I mean, I still don't think lethal force will be necessary because, like I said, police officers should not be the judge, jurors, and executioners. But, there are a lot of times where lethal force is necessary to save others. Yeah, I just couldn't answer confidently on that question.
Well, that's to say. So you say we shouldn't be the judge, jury, and executioner. You're absolutely right. And I tell people I'm not the judge, but being a judge, jury, and executioner is different from making a decision that's going to either save you or somebody else. So I saw a video the other day where a police officer was actually getting attacked by a guy with a knife. She shot him 3 times, and he was still coming at her with a knife. So are you judge, jury, and executioner at that point, or are you trying to stop an imminent threat to your life and the safety of others? And that's where the difference becomes. So I love your thought process, David, because that was my thought process. But when I realized I have an obligation to make sure that I'm safe as well as the public, that's where all this decision-making comes into play. I have 3 kids, and my son asks me the question every single day, Daddy, are you coming home tonight? He asks me that question every single day I leave the house, even today. Do I tell him, no, I ain't coming home? Or do I just tell him, like, hey, son, or do I do everything in my power to make sure I come home because I'm safe?
Yeah, like even with this, there's still, I feel like it could be taken, this mindset can be taken in a way to perpetuate the belief systems that certain people have who say things like, we'll try to say, oh, let's get all the facts first and try to justify deaths that are clearly not in the right. For example, what about instances when people have called the cops themselves to dispute to help solve a situation, and then they're the ones who end up getting shot or killed, or when people were just not armed? And I've seen a lot of, especially within the past few months, just Instagram comments, Twitter comments, just whatever, people saying things like, oh, well, he shouldn't have been, for example, specifically for the George Floyd incident, he shouldn't have been selling counterfeit money. Oh, so that's a justification.
That doesn't justify it. Nope,
like
not at all. That's a problem. You're right.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you say to people who, actually I want to get more into what's it like in your police force? I'm sure you've butted heads with people before on things like this. There's got to be I'm sure some of your colleagues who really don't like you because of the work that you're doing. What is it like for you having these types of conversations or doing the work that you're doing with people who are supposed to be on your team that are just totally against you? Can you share some of your experiences with that?
So here's what's surprising. What's surprising is that it doesn't occur as much as people believe it. Like, I don't have a lot of people that butt heads with me. If they do butt heads with me, it's not necessarily on the issues. It's more so because they hate this because I'm doing something that they're not. That's kind of honestly where a lot of it comes from, is like, hey, I'm doing something that they're not. Initially, when I got started, they were hating on me because I was a new guy trying to change something. Like my boy David, that's why I'm so proud of you, brother, is because you are being a part of the solution. You're not just using a hashtag and saying, hey, hashtag this, and not doing anything about it. Being an actual part of the solution. That's why I love you. So that's where some of the hate was coming from at first, because like, who's this new guy trying to do something? But as far as the actual issues themselves, we got to understand something. Like you said, Chaz, you're absolutely right. One of the issues and one of the things I've always hated is when we always try to justify everything. We can't always justify everything. But I will say it's few and far between that we can unanimously say that these actions of this officer were wrong completely. And there's few and far between. And George Floyd was one of those. George Floyd, I don't care who you are, there's no justification for what happened there. No justification at all. But that's few and far between. The reason it's few and far between because there's a lot more that goes into every single situation. And the reason why it's so hard for officers, and this is what I learned after post being a police officer, the reason it's so hard the reason it's so easy for officers to make comments like that is because every single day, like when I get off of this call today, I'm going to go and patrol for 10 hours. In some type of situation that only me and the person that's there know all the facts of what's going on, where I have a whole bunch of onlookers who are looking on and don't know what's going on. And so when I get into a situation, if I have to use force, if I have to punch somebody, if I have to hit somebody, whatever it may be, I know why I did it. But not everybody else knows why I did it. And so as a police officer, you start trying to say, well, there has to be more to this situation. And the reason we say that is because we're in those situations every single day that makes you realize this is why I did what I did. Again, it's not justifying their behavior or what they're saying, because again, George Floyd was one of those few and far between moments that there is that you can't say anything that would make me think otherwise. I don't care if he had just killed somebody. You know what I mean? If he just killed somebody, the law says that the moment something is no longer a threat, the moment they are no longer imminent threat or posing a threat to you or the immediate public, is when we also have to reevaluate the situation, reassess the situation, and stop using that level of force. That's why you can't justify it. But those are few and far between. So that's why officers start to say that stuff. And so as far as the butting heads, are there bad officers in our profession? Absolutely. But what profession could I go? What profession could I talk about today and talk about where everybody in that profession is absolutely good? I mean, we could talk about malpractice. I mean, there's so many doctors that have killed people that nobody knows about. What if we put cameras? Imagine what putting cameras in the surgical room would look like. What would we see? Probably some crazy stuff. And so again, unfortunately, law enforcement is just polarized because it sells money and it instills fear. I'm not one of those conspiracy theorist type guys. I hate to go into that, but at the same time, we're polarizing something that there's a lot of other issues that also need attention as well.
Yeah. I want to get back to this in a second, but David, we're going to just switch gears really quick. And I want to get more into just behind the scenes of how you pulled together this invention, the safety pouch. What went into designing this? Did it take a lot of research on the manufacturing side as well as just statistically? Like where did all this come from? Share your process with us.
Yeah, so I'll first get into how I came up with the idea, the safety pouch, and I first came up with the concept when I don't know, I must have just had turned 17 because I just got my driver's license, and before my parents handed me the keys to my car, they were just having to talk with me, basically, what to do in case of a traffic stop. That was them just telling me, don't make sudden movements. Make sure you announce to the officer what you're reaching for and where you're reaching, try and be as safe as possible. And if for some reason you do get arrested, go peacefully, don't protest, just trying to stay as safe as possible. So while they were talking to me, I was thinking to myself, well, there must be a solution to the issue, with the reaching aspect. And after I did some research online, I didn't really see anything that I liked and that I thought was really safe. So I kind of just forgot about it at that point. And then once I got to Loyola and I graduated high school and everything, I got accidentally enrolled into this business class, and we got assigned our midterm projects. And that's when I remembered the idea about the safety pouch. So that's what I decided to work on. And I presented it to the class and to my professor, and she loved the idea so much. She told me she thinks it's a really great idea and that I should bring it to the market. So it took a couple of months to get it to where it is now, because when he initially started out, it was called the safety tray, and it was basically a flat tray with 2 prongs on it, like on the end of it, with 3 pockets that would hold your information, and you would roll your window all the way down and just place the tray down into the window slot. But once I made that prototype, it didn't work out. It was too big and too clunky, so and it wasn't really safe. So that's when I got into reaching out to some police officers here in New Orleans, and I worked closely with some of them, and they helped me design a safety pouch to be as safe as possible. And that's why when you look at the safety pouch, it only comes in orange to make it unique but very noticeable as well. Same thing with the large clip, so you can stick to your sun visor, so you don't have to worry about reaching into anything.
Right. And now you're getting attention from like a lot of celebrities, fortunately, like Tina Knowles, Beyonce's mom, and Erykah Badu and others. Can you share with us what it felt like when people first started reaching out to you, and who else has hit you up?
Yeah, so I think the first celebrity who reached out to me was The Game, and he was just basically telling me like, good job. And I was just, because it was like around 7 a.m, I just woke up and I was looking at my messages, and I was like, because their followers underneath was like 11.6 million followers. Who is this? So I clicked on it, and I was in shock then. And then Erykah Badu had commented, and I love Erykah Badu. She was one of my favorite artists for a long time. And so that really meant something to me. And then that's when, I think 2 weeks ago, I saw Tina Lawson had tagged us in one of her posts. And it didn't fully register at first that she had posted about it. Once it finally registered, it felt like my body went numb.
Once it hit, you're like, oh, snap. I just, what?
But she's really been using her platform to really help the community in general to spread awareness to issues that are happening, and also to, you know, bring light to people who are hoping to make a difference. And shoot,
Right.
that's
Do you have one? Do you have one on hand with you that you can show us?
Yeah, I do. I have one right here.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah. Show us how it works.
So what you would do is you would have all your information stored in like your car insurance, your registration, or any like gun permits or any permits you may need to show to an officer. You know, all that can be stored in here. And, you know, a lot of people, they choose to hold their driver's license in their own personal wallet. So, you know, you could just quickly take out your driver's license out your wallet, place it inside of here or in a clear part, and you just place it, you roll it down your window halfway, and you'll slide this clip right here down onto the window. And so when that officer approaches, all your information will be readily available for them to take off the window and go back to their vehicle. And when designing a safety pouch, I wanted to make it, you know, really for all people. So I decided to include the clear part in the front, the clear folder where you can place a medical alert card for, you know, people who may have mental or physical impairments. So when an officer approaches, they'll immediately be aware that, you know, that person has a impairment. And also, like, another issue we were having was like, what if an officer doesn't know what the safety pouch is? Or so what I decided to do is include a sticker when you get your order that says safety pouch user, and it goes on your back windshield to immediately alert that officer when they pull you over that you do have a safety pouch. And, you know, with the product, you know, somewhat going viral now, I'm hoping, you know, that spreads the words out to the police departments. But, you know, on our end, we're working with different police departments to, you know, get the word out about it. And, you know,
hey, well, David, I'm gonna let you know, bro. You consider me, man, however a resource I can help you, brother. Cause like I told you, man, I'm super proud of you, man. You remind me of me in many ways.
Wow.
Of being a part of the solution. I mean, everybody can talk. You know, that's, I tell people, you know, everybody hashtag George Floyd, hashtag this and all that other stuff. It's cool to say that stuff, but in 2 months from now, when the next big headline comes out, what are you actually contributing? What are you actually doing to be a part of the solution? And so, you know, I'm super proud of you, man. However I can support you in many ways, I'm all about it, man. And the mere fact, and we talk about this word hope, and, you know, where is the hope? The hope is this. The mere fact, David, that you're 18 years old as a Black man and can create something and get traction like that is hope. The mere fact that you can work alongside with the people that everybody's trying to portray as the enemy, the mere fact that you can work alongside these individuals for a solution is hope. And so that's the balance that I've been talking about, is having that, hey, I may not know all the answers. I may not have all the answers, but I'm willing to go out there and try to find the answers. I'm willing to go out there and have these open conversations, realizing that, hey, I may not be right, or you may not be right, but I'm not going to shut my ears off the moment I don't hear something I want to hear. And that's what's so sad, man, is like, we can't dialogue because the moment somebody says something that they don't want to hear, oh, nope, my ears are closed now.
It just feeds into the division even more.
Exactly, man. And and it's doing it within families. Think about this. If you have a Democrat and a Republican in one family, just because you label as Democrat or Republican, it automatically creates a division within your own family.
Right.
That's sad. That's sad. You know what I mean? To where no, we don't talk politics because it's going to divide us. Like, you know what I mean? I always like to say, I'm more of like an independent because I can see both sides of it. You know what I mean? I can see both sides in many ways, but yet if I'm a Republican or Democrat, I can't talk to it. So, man, David, whatever you need, man, you got whatever you need support, man. I'm proud of you, brother. Seriously, I'm super proud. I'll probably be working for you one day.
Yo, Ryan, looking at this as a police officer, how do you feel this will impact just traffic stops or citizens or drivers' interactions with police officers?
So I'm one of the things about me, I'm always transparent. I'm always honest. I think if I'm honest, I think it will impact the industry in a tremendous way.
Wow.
And in a tremendous way, I'm saying that for people that are want to do the right things and are genuinely afraid of getting hurt or harmed by police. And it's going to help police officers out because here's one of the things that's a fact. The one most unpredictable thing in life is human nature. The one thing that makes a police officer's job so dangerous is we don't know who we're talking to. I don't know if you just escaped from a prison and you're not going back. I don't know if you're just taking your kids to a soccer game. I don't know until I have interaction. And so the more we can refer movements in the car, the easier it's going to be both on you and the officer, because now I don't have to assume that he's reaching for a gun. Here's the only thing that's going to be hard is the one thing that's going to be hard is that, okay, there are, unfortunately, going back to that, what I said earlier, there's good and evil out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guns that we've taken off the street, a lot of the drugs we've taken off the street, a lot of the, the homicide suspects we've gotten off the street comes off for proactive stops. We did a proactive stop yesterday and we removed over an ounce of methamphetamine in a car. Now, some people, you have those that say, oh, well, it's everybody's own prerogative. If they want to use drugs, they can use drugs. Well, if that was really the case, then I would be fine. Everybody can use drugs if it was limited to you, but it creates a quality of life issue for everybody else because you start breaking into people's stuff, hurting people, all this other stuff. So that's why we do it. So the reason I bring that up is because, that pouch is going to be successful for 90% of the population who wants to do the right thing, but the 10% of the population that are trying to avoid us in certain type of ways, that's where I'd be curious to see how it's going to work.
Okay. So speaking of just the good and evil thing, and then just to bring up some statistics as well, I want you to verify these also. But so just a couple things that come to mind is like the tendency of white police officers to fear black men, or and then the percentage that drugs are like more drugs being. Tell me if I'm wrong with this, but are more drugs found on white people than black people, but more black people are stopped, and then just like overall, just building relationships and trust between police officers and citizens. Like, what do you have to say about like just a few of those things?
So the first one, what was the first one? Go back to
the first one was about like just the lack of trust between like citizens and officers, and the tendency that white cops and officers fear black men.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So what I want to bring up is, we have to ask ourselves, is that a police issue or is that a systematic issue? I say it's a systematic issue. Why? There's evidence of it. You go back to blackface. What were they doing during the blackface movement? They were painting themselves black. They were portraying themselves to either be animals or clowns or whatever. So through society, we've from the very beginning, when black people start coming into America, they started to basically start showing black people as being less than, or also being in fear of black people. So do we have people that work in law enforcement that may have a little bit more fear of a black person? And I would, absolutely. But is it necessarily wrong? And the reason I say is it wrong is because if you take a person that grew up in Laguna Beach, that's never really had any interaction, that's a good guy, good kid, and all he knows is what he's seen on TV and this and that, and you put him in a position as a police officer, and he actually has a natural fear more of black people just because that's how he was raised, is it necessarily wrong for him to feel that way systematically? Yes, it's wrong because that's what the system has created, but it's not necessarily wrong on an individual level because he doesn't even realize he's doing it. So how do we fix it? You need more officers that look like the community that police the streets in many different ways.
How about like it's also true that there are just officers who are out there to, even if it's a smaller percentage of them, but they're actually racist cops who are truly out there to just kill black people,
So like you have racist cops, but again, you have racist cops, but how do we identify? There's a guy, I can't remember his name. He's a black guy that actually infiltrated the KKK. And when he infiltrated the KKK, he actually found out that there were officers that were members of the KKK.
Right.
So
and how recently was that?
This is over the period of years. He's converted. I don't know how many people now. How many people were in the KKK? I don't know. I got to get the statistics. But here's the fact: is are there people that like that exist? Absolutely. I mean, we can't say that every single person in law enforcement is good. Majority of us are. The hard thing is how do we know that these 1%ers exist? Because you think that guy's gonna be KKK around me? Heck no.
And what can we do about their existence and their presence in the police force? Because I think that 1% is really what is creating the majority of the problem as well.
But see, the thing is one, we have to make it uncomfortable for them. Two, we have to hire better police officers, and we got to be better in our hiring standards. Three, we can always be better in our background standards. And four, we have to come to the realization that we're never going to get, I don't care what profession it is, you'll never be able to get rid of the 1% just because that's a human nature thing. Does that mean we don't strive to do it? We always strive to get rid of that 1%. But if you just look at human nature in general, you'll never be able to get rid of bad doctors. You'll never be able to get rid of bad teachers. You'll never be able. So I'm not saying we live with it. I'm saying we make it as comfortable as possible by good officers like myself speaking up when we see that bad behavior. And I do that on my Instagram page. I've called out bad police work all the time. You know what I mean? And I've taken some heat for it, but who cares? I'm trying to be a part of the solution. But we just got to be realists and say, look, we can't get so caught up in realizing that 1% doesn't make up a majority. Yeah. And unfortunately, we're looking at it through a lens as we're viewing the majority as a 1%. And that's not necessarily right.
How about the presence of policing in schools? Do you think that's necessary, or could there be like another?
Absolutely, it's necessary. And that's coming from a school resource officer. I actually put up a video on my page yesterday about this. The reason why is because, again, the image is like, oh, well, we're going to contribute to this criminalization of our kids at a young age. Man, as a school resource officer, man, I can count on one hand how many times I actually took somebody to juvenile hall. I was more of a counselor. I was more of a big brother. I was a mentor. I stopped somebody from feeling suicidal. I've developed relationships I saved somebody's life who was shot. I was the first responder, if somebody from the outside came into the school that was a threat to the kids. And so what we need to talk about is, instead of getting rid of school resource officers, what we need to talk about is getting the best qualified school resource officers to be on our campus. Because one thing I know for sure is that we do have some bad police officers on these campuses that shouldn't be there. You should not have a police officer that has a bad attitude, that's mad at the system, that's mad at his job, that's mad at people in general. He should not be a school resource officer. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how can we get the best qualified candidate on that campus, as opposed to getting rid of it. Because I can give you countless emails of parents or messages I've gotten from parents saying, I'm so thankful that you were on my son's campus, whether it's because I saved him, whether it's because I stopped him from committing suicide, whether it's just because I was a big brother to him and now I gave him other ways to expire. You know, if you were on my campus, bro, we wouldn't be talking. It wouldn't be Officer Ryan talking to David. It'd be Ryan and David talking as a big brother saying, hey, look, this is how we're going to get your business started. This is how we're going to get you there. This is how we're going to steer you. And so that's where the conversation shift has to occur. Like, no, let's not get rid of it. Let's just figure out the right people that need to be on the campus. And let's raise that standard of the people that are on our campus.
So what you're sharing now is making me rethink the roles of police officers. Because what we've seen, or what personally I've seen in the media, is that police officers' jobs are to keep people from doing bad stuff. But it's so much more than that.
Way more.
Can you share, just share some of the things? Because even just with it, is that taught in police force training? Like the expanse of what is supposed to be share.
This is the reality. We have a system where if something goes wrong, our first instinct is to call 911. Example, we go on barking dog calls.
Karens.
Bro, I'm like, straight up, I'm like, to this day, we get called and say, hey, my neighbor's dog is barking too loud. In my mind, I'm thinking, like, what you want me to go there and do? Be a dog whisperer and tell them to stop barking? Like, that's not in my job description. Like, they didn't teach me that in the academy. But at the same time, they're calling because they know that they have a problem and they need a solution. And so what do? They call the police. Now, do I think that we are, in many ways, do we wear many hats? Yes. Should we wear many hats? I'm all about reallocating certain sectors of law enforcement to other people that can get the job so you don't need police. But at the same time, you know, there's this idea going around like, well, let's put social workers in these mental health situations so that way we know it will come out with a better situation. Well, it sounds nice, sounds great. But have we considered the mental health case where the guy is holding a machete and he's in his mind, he's living on Mars and everybody that comes in his vicinity is trying to attack him? Yeah. How's the social worker going to respond in that situation? And we can say like, oh, well, these don't happen all the time. No, they happen all the time. I've had a lady point a 12-inch steak knife at my face. And so my point is, how is a social worker going to respond to that? That's why law enforcement got that in the first place. It's because social workers were going to those.
Do you think it's possible for social workers and police officers to work together? Like, is there, you know, I feel like there's just more solutions.
We are. So not every, but again, going back to the beginning, I'm sorry I talk fast, but going back to the beginning of the podcast is my department's already doing that. We actually have somebody from the Department of Behavioral Health that has an office at our police station, and we call them out to every single mental health call that we have once the scene is safe. So that way they can go into their role and say, hey, look, how do we solve this problem? Yeah. So we're already doing that. But is that across the board? It's not. So again, you look at something that went haywire in Idaho, and everybody's like, oh, shame on policing, shame on policing. Well, no, their standards weren't the same standards that they have in California. So that's where the improvements need to come, is we need a unified standard.
All right, David, I'm gonna get back to you in 1 second, but there's one more question, major question I want to ask you, right?
Love it, man.
Big topic right now. Hashtag defund the police. Thoughts, please.
So I'm a former college athlete, played Division I college football. And I like to use examples. You guys have probably already seen that. Mm-hmm. If you guys go on YouTube right now and Google Michigan car wash, the University of Michigan car wash for football players, mm-hmm. It's going to show a brand new facility that they just got. When they get off of the football field, they take their shoulder pads off, they put them on something, they get all cleaned up, then they walk through a maze of showers that hit them all over their body. Then they walk through a maze of a pool, a cold pool, so that way that ice water starts to rejuvenate their body to get them ready, so that way they can perform optimally at their next practice and their next game. Mm-hmm. How much money did that take? A lot of money, right? Why are people spending a lot of money on that? Because they want those athletes to perform the best way possible on Saturday so they can win the game. So if we talk about defunding the police, what we're really doing is we're going to take money away from police officers. The same people that say police officers need more training, where are they going to get the training money from? Because mm-hmm. that all costs money. So I understand the concept, and they've also talked about reallocation, whereas, like when we talk about the other example of social workers, that's where reallocation would work, is because now you're bringing somebody in from behavioral health, and we're going to put more money towards something that's actually going on in our city more. But when we talk about defunding them and taking money away from training budgets, it's a terrible idea. I mean, if you look at LA County Sheriff's Department right now, because of the defunding of police, they got rid of 5 major bureaus within the department. Major crimes. Well, what's major crimes? Major crimes is all your homicides, your murders, all your assault with the deadly weapons, all mm-hmm. your great body. They got rid of that unit. They also got rid of the human trafficking unit, the sexual crimes against children, the rape unit. They got rid of that unit because they can't fund it anymore. Wow. They also got rid of the cops unit, which is the community organized policing, which mm-hmm. is, what did people say? We want more community police. Well, they had a unit. They got rid of that. They also got rid of their parks and recreation unit, and they got rid of their gang unit. The mm-hmm. gang unit, what's the gang unit for? Well, they're supposed to go out there and be proactive so they can suppress the gang activity. Well, they got rid of that unit. So because they got rid of all those units, does that necessarily mean that crime is going to stop? Heck mm-hmm. no. People are going to say, oh, man, this is opportunity. So we got to be very careful on what we say mm-hmm. and what we really mean. And it's got to be structured in a way to say, hey, look, we can do better. How do we do it, as opposed to just getting rid of it? They're getting rid of police departments right now. I mean, Seattle, Washington, Chaz, I mean, they got rid of a whole police department for a month. And what happened there? People were getting killed. Matter of fact, one of the guy's son got killed, and now he's suing the mayor because they never intervened. Yeah.
So, okay, that a lot of bad news. But how about sharing some success stories through Breaking Barriers United? What have been some victories?
Hey, there we go. So there's hope. There's hope. Ain't no negativity, y'all. Ain't no negativity. The hope is this. The hope mm-hmm. is that you got guys like David mm-hmm. that are being a part of the solution, not part of the problem, thinking outside of the box, finding ways that we can all be safe. Not only the police officers, but you as community members. The hope is we got my man Chaz as being able to connect this, being able to put all these pieces together so we can have successful dialogue, utilizing this mm-hmm. platform. The hope is me going into schools. I have countless stories. I have a story where a kid was he went to one of my presentations, and his whole family is inundated in gangs. Mm-hmm. After his presentation, he came out and said, man, like, I don't want to be like them. I actually want to go into law enforcement and be a part of the solution. So his mom, this is a black kid, his mom took him down to the local police department and got him enrolled in an Explorer program and a cadet program so he can be a part of the solution. So there's a lot of good out there. There's a lot of good that's going to happen. You know, I always say, you know, in order to move forward, things got to get worse a little bit. You know, we see a burning building. The burning building's on fire. Everything is coming down. While everybody's running away, me, Chaz, and David, we're all running towards it. Well, why are we running towards it? Because we know that when that fire is out, we're going to be able to rebuild that building, and we're going to be able to do it way better than what that building looked like before. That's the hope right there. That's the positivity, and I'm doing it all over, and so are you guys.
Yo, thank you for that. That was a great answer. Wow. But David, speaking of what you're doing, your process, like, where are you currently? In the, like, I think, just so that everybody can know, where are you in the process of manufacturing? Are you looking for investors, financing? Have you shopped it around? And just, you know, what can people do to help if possible?
Yeah, so right now, the current, state we're in right now with the safety pouches, they're currently being manufactured right now.
Awesome, bro. Let's go.
Come
on, man.
Let's go. Shark Tank, real life Shark Tank, baby.
Yeah, so I'm expected to receive them by beginning of August to mid-August.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as investors, I mean, I'm open to it, but I've been trying to do everything on my own, and I've been pretty successful with it. But it's definitely something I'm open to. But it's just, if now that I'm looking back from the success I had with it, I think I was just lucky because I was always in the right place at the right time, if that makes sense. Whereas another kid like me, if they came up with something similar, but they didn't have the right resources that I have, it wouldn't have came to fruition. So, I went to a private school my whole life. My parents made sure they provided me with that. They made sure I went to, a small college, private college as well. And, with that, it gave me the resources I needed, and versus the kids who may not have those same resources available to them. And they probably came up with great ideas, but because those resources weren't available for them, they couldn't bring it to life. And, as I grow and my brand grows, I'm hoping to, build a platform to help kids, like that, who don't have those resources, to give it to them, to help them see their ideas through. Because there's so many great ideas out there.
So I feel like a proud big brother, man. I'm a proud big brother over here.
Yeah, that's what's up. I'm gonna make sure y'all two connect after this as well. Yeah, but so basically, you're already thinking ahead. Like, it's beyond the safety pouch. You want to make sure that other people get opportunities to continue.
We got some other products we're working on
already.
Right now as well.
Dang, bro.
Hey, he's dropping dimes. Hey, I want to be a part of it, David. Seriously, man. However I can help. Especially, I think one of the things you're going to need is that law enforcement, that partnership. Because you want to be able to have us know what we're coming up on and recognizing it, man. And I got some really, really good connections in the industry, man. So, man, this is a brotherhood, man. I love you guys, man. Seriously, and David, I'm proud of you, man. I can only hope. I got 3 young kids right now, and I can only hope that my sons grow up and are like you in many ways, brother.
Wow. Seriously. That's real, man. Yo, I think that I want to ask you both. I just like for some final words about what we can do or what you believe we can do to, just fight back against and help stop this police violence that's just happening so rampantly today. But I think one major part of it that people, I guess, kind of refuse to really lean into is that before, and I'm not saying that it's on the fault of the communities, but I think that fear is really getting in the way in some major ways, because the more that we see these instances of violence occurring, the more that fear is built, the more that division is built, and the less that we see and the less opportunities we have, or the less we step into creating relationships with the loads of good cops that are out there, but we're just not aware of them. I think that has a role to play, despite the fact that there are so many, not so many, but despite the fact that there are a bunch of bad cops that exist. But on the other end, there are a lot of good ones. And so I just want to hear more about you guys' thoughts about what do you think are some practical, tangible steps that we can take?
I'll let David go first.
Yeah, so what I think is it really needs to start on the local level first versus national. So like here in New Orleans, Mardi Gras, festivals and all, they're a huge part of our culture, but the millions that the city spends of taxpayer dollars going towards that is unbelievable, and yet we have a high crime rate. So why isn't some of this money that's going towards parades and festivals going towards mental health workers, and people who's on the front lines dealing with the issues to help stop the crime before it happens? So I think if it really starts on a local level, it will grow from there and expand to national, where you will really start to see the change. So it just really needs to happen on the local level first.
Ryan, I want to ask you a more specific question, actually. A lot of times there are officers who just get away with straight up murder. Like when you bring it down to just the basic level, it's a person killing another person, and they're getting away with it because they're protected by, like the example you used before, college athletes, a lot of times they'll do something and be able to get away with it that another just everyday student won't. What is your solution to that for accountability within like the police force?
So I'm gonna end on this note because for the sake of time, I'll be working. Y'all about to get me fired from my day job. I'll just play it. So one thing is obviously we just got to be able to, like I said earlier, we gotta make things uncomfortable for officers, and the way we do that is by doing the right thing. I always tell my new trainees, any new officer I train, I always say, as long as you're moral, as long as you're ethically, as long as you're morally correct, as long as you're ethically correct, as long as you lead with love, as long as you lead with empathy, as long as you lead with respect, and you're safe, you'll never have to worry about anything. That's how we get rid of a lot of the stuff, the bad stuff we see. Wow. And we got to do that internally. So, I ask you guys to trust people like me that are inside of the profession to start bringing forth that change that you guys want to see outside of the profession. Yeah. And then the last thing, I'm just going to leave you guys with this words before I get off is, it's funny. I have 3 kids and because I have 3 kids, my wife stays at home with them. She, sometimes my kids act up, my boys specifically sometimes. And I used to do this thing. I used to say this thing before I left the house is I would always tell my son, I was like, close your mouth. And it was funny because he would recite it. It'd be close your mouth, open your ears, self-check. So when I tell him, when I leave the house, I'm like, what do I expect? He'd be like, close your mouth, open your ears, self-check. It's so funny. It's so small. It's so easy. I mean, that a 3-year-old could understand, but think about, let's evaluate that. Close my mouth. We always got to get the last word in. We always got to say something in opposition. We always got to debate. Close your mouth. Secondly, open your ears. Yeah. Even if it's not something you want to hear, even if it's something you don't want to hear, open your ears because you might hear something that you need to hear. That goes along the lines of being empathetic for people. Yeah. And then the last thing is self-check. Well, what is a self-check? What am I doing to be a part of the solution? When I get stopped by police, am I trying to make this a dangerous situation? Am I holding my own actions accountable and making this a dangerous situation? And the same thing for officers. Am I escalating this situation when I don't need to escalate this situation over a small traffic stop? If I'm over here pulling you over for a ticket, am I escalating this situation that doesn't need to be escalated? Yeah. So if we all can just hear to those words, close your mouth, open your ears, self-check, man, that would take us a long way, man. So I appreciate you, Chaz. I appreciate you, David. I appreciate you, Lisa, all you guys for having me on. I hate that I got to rush off because
share your socials real quick before you hop off. So people know, like, your podcast, Instagram, all that.
Because your boy about to be under that unemployment line. I'm trying to tell you. So Instagram is breaking_barriers_united. Please follow me on there. Again, that's breaking_barriers_united. We have Breaking Barriers United on Facebook, Breaking Barriers United Instagram, YouTube. And then our podcast is called It's Needed, hashtag It's Needed, ITSNEEDED. So It's Needed. So hashtag that. You can find it on all major podcast networks, iTunes, Spotify, whatever. You can find it there. And Chaz, David, I got to get you on mine now.
I'm down. Absolutely.
We got to make that happen, man. Yeah, man. So, David, let's connect. All right, where give me your socials right now.
David, share your
stuff. So you can, my personal Instagram is IM_David Price, and the business page will be the Safety Pouch.
You have a website for it?
Yeah. So the website is just thesafetypouch.com.
Perfect. All right, and that's where everybody can go to figure out how to support you and all that.
Okay. Yep. You can buy a safety pouch, or if you want to just donate one, you can.
Okay. Awesome, Ryan. I'm gonna let you go. I know you got a hard stop. Thank you, guys.
I love y'all. I just follow. I've been following you, Chad. Just followed you, David. Man, love all you guys, the audience. Man, tell everybody I said thank you for tuning in.
Absolutely.
And I got to get out of here before I have to be in this unemployment line at 2.
Perfect. All right. Thank you guys so much for being on. Police violence against Black people is a real thing. In San Diego, for example, Black people are 59% more likely to have force used on them during a stop, despite being only 6% of the population in the first place. This is true. This is a fact. It's not debatable. As a Black man myself, it's frustrating. And at times, it's actually scary. But I'm not going to allow myself to live in fear or let my emotions or anger get the best of me. What I try to do is talk to people to just process the emotions that I'm going through and work through these fears and frustrations. And if that's how you're feeling, you definitely should too. I highly recommend that. And then afterward, channel that energy into something positive. Do what you can, like Ryan and David are. as a country, as a whole, we've made so much progress. I won't deny that. That's so true. But that does not mean that racism and these issues do not exist anymore in our country. Because I even have friends who have told me that. It's not true. Sometimes I don't even have the energy to share that with them. We live in a crazy world and we have a long way to go. So please do your part by educating yourself about history, learning about other cultures, having uncomfortable conversations, doing things that you may even be afraid of. That's what that may include at times. And ultimately, when you can, please use your voice to speak up for others. Even if it's just one person, you can make a difference in that one person's life. My name's Chaz Smith, and this is Simply Put.